Welcome to the tutorial for the Rafaela top and dress. Okay, so the first step is to stay stitch the armholes. It's optional. It prevents them from stretching. So sew a regular stitch around all 4 armholes using a 5mm seam allowance. So then we're going to sew the horizontal pintucks. So on the right side of the front and the back, join the pintuck markings by tracing a line. These indicate the fold of the pintucks. Then fold the fabric on each line, wrong side together, and press well to create a crease. And if you're using a heat erasable pen, make sure to not erase the lines you're not pressing. So fold it the way I'm doing in the video right now. Then refolding them one by one as you go, sew the pintucks at 5mm seam allowance, so 5mm away from the fold. Once you're done sewing all of them, press them towards the hem. Then we're going to move on to the lace insertion. So on the right side of the front and the back, join the lace markings by tracing a line. These indicate the top and bottom edges of lace. Then pin the lace or hold it as you sew between the markings and edge stitch the lace to the bodice on the top and bottom edges. Then double check that you didn't miss the lace like I did here, and if you did, just go back and sew again. Then from the wrong side of the fabric, trace a line in the middle of the lace stitch lines. Then cut along the line, being careful not to cut your lace, to create a seam allowance on each side of the lace, and then press the slit open so that the right side of the fabric shows at the top and bottom of the lace. Then trim the seam allowance down to 1cm if it's wider than that, and then fold it on itself twice to enclose the raw edge and press. It can be a little bit finicky if you only have 1cm or less seam allowance on each side, but take your time here and then you can refold it as you sew. So then edge stitch the seam allowance to the bodice along the fold on the top and bottom, and then press. And this is what it should look like from the right side. So then we're going to move on to sewing the vertical pintucks. So mark the fold line of the pintucks on the front and the back. Trace all of them to the same length for now, so around 15cm. Start by the center lines, placing them 1cm away from the center front and center back. The rest of the lines are 2cm apart. Then fold the fabric on each line wrong side together and press well to create a crease. Then following the measurements given in the instructions, mark a perpendicular line on each crease to indicate the length of the pintuck. Then refolding them as you go, sew the pintucks at 5mm away from the fold, down to the mark indicating their length. And then cut off all the little threads once you're done. From the center front, press the pintucks towards their respective sides, and then top stitch the pintucks around 3mm from the top raw edge, making sure they face their respective sides. And this is to be sure that they don't get twisted as we sew the lace. Then on the wrong side of the front and the back, trace a seam allowance line 1cm down from the top raw edge. Then fold it over to the right side and press it well. And then to end up with a 5mm wide fold and to enclose the raw edge, fold another 5mm inward and press. It won't stay folded, but that's okay. You'll fold it again as you're sewing. Place the lace underneath the fold so that it overlaps with the seam allowance by 2 mm and pin and or clip. Then edge stitch the folded seam allowance to the lace, refolding it as you go if necessary. And it will be thick here, so use a hem jumper or a piece of folded fabric like I'm using here to start sewing so that your presser foot is flat and not tilted. Then from the right side, press the lace up, and from the wrong side, press the seam allowance down. From the right side of the fabric, top stitch the bodice to the seam allowance 2-3 mm from the edge. Here, it might be easier if you lengthen your stitch length to make sewing over that much thickness easier, and same thing, use a hem jumper to start sewing, and repeat for the other bodice. Then we're going to move on to sewing the side seams, and we're using French seams here, but you can also use regular seams as given in the instructions. So for French seams, place the front and back wrong sides together and pin the side seams. Make sure the pintucks and the lace are well aligned from front to back, and sew at 5 mm seam allowance. Then press the seam open then to the back, and then trim the seam allowance a couple of millimeters if necessary to remove any loose threads. Then flip the bodice wrong side out and sew the side seams at 7 mm to enclose the raw edge. Then press to the back. Then we're going to sew the armhole bias. So fold over to the wrong side one short edge of your armhole bias on itself by 1 cm and place it right sides together at the top edge of one of the armholes, so lined up with the edge of the lace. Sew at 7 mm seam allowance. When arriving to the other side, stop sewing and trim the end of the bias so it hangs off by 1 mm only, and fold it on itself. Then finish sewing the bias. Then press the bias towards the seam allowance and the seam allowance towards the bias from the wrong side. Then understitch the bias to the seam allowance 1-2 mm along the seam. Then you fold the bias to the wrong side twice to enclose its raw edge and edge stitch along the fold. Then repeat for the other armhole and press. Then we're going to sew the sleeves. So start by hemming the sides of the sleeves by folding them over to the wrong side twice by around 6 mm and press. Edge stitch along the fold. Then we're going to hem the curved bottom raw edge of the sleeves. So to do so, start by sewing a basting stitch 6 mm from the edge to create a guideline. Then fold the seam allowance along the basting stitches over to the wrong side and press. Then fold it again to enclose the raw edge and press. Remove the basting stitches and edge stitch the hem along the fold. Press your hem. Then we're going to create the elastic casing. So fold over the top raw edge of the sleeves to the wrong side, by 2 centimeters. Press and fold it inward again by 1 centimeter to enclose the raw edge, and press again. This will create a 1 centimeter wide elastic casing. Then make a mark on the casing 1.75 centimeter from each side. Then edge stitch along the fold of the casing to close it between both marks, not all along the fold. We'll need the ends open to insert and secure the elastic. So then cut your sleeve elastic if you haven't done so yet, following the measurements given in the instructions, and insert it in the casing with a safety pin. When the end of the elastic reaches the mark, secure it with a clip or pin, or simply hold it in place and sew over the casing to secure the elastic 2 mm inside the mark. Then keep fitting the elastic through and repeat the same step when the elastic reaches the other end. Edge stitch along the fold of the casings on both ends to close it fully. And give your sleeve a good press to flatten the ruffles. Then we're going to attach the sleeves to the bodice. So start by making a mark on the front and back bodices, perpendicular to the necklines and parallel to the pintucks. Then fold over the sides of the sleeve, so just the width of the hem, towards the wrong side, and place the edge right sides together along the mark you just made on the bodice. Clip at the top because it will be thick, and pin at the bottom to secure it in place. Then repeat for the other sleeve and the other side of the bodice. Then top stitch the sleeve to the bodice along the fold. And here, same thing as earlier, use a hem jumper or a piece of folded fabric to start sewing because it will be pretty thick. Then last step is to hem the top. So fold over and press the bottom raw edge to the wrong side by 1 centimeter, and then fold it over again by 8 centimeters and press, and then pin the hem in place. Edge stitch along the fold of the hem from the wrong side of the garment and give your hem a good press. You're done! So for the dress, the first step is to sew the front neckline ties. So fold their short edges over to the wrong side by 1 centimeter and press. Then fold each tie lengthwise right sides together and press again. And then sew at 6 millimeter from the folded edge. Then trim the seam allowance by half if necessary. And then turn the ties inside out using your preferred method. Here I like to use a loop turner. The second option to sew your ties, if you don't want or can't turn them inside out, is to fold each tie lengthwise, wrong sides together and press. Then fold one of their ends by 1 centimeter to the wrong side. And then fold both raw edges toward the middle, so towards the center crease, and press again, and then fold them in half again to end up with a 75 millimeter wide tie with all raw edges enclosed. Then press again and sew along the folded edge. The second step is to sew the front neckline, so fold over the top raw edge by 2 centimeter to the wrong side and press. Then fold it again inward by 1 centimeter to enclose the raw edge and end up with a 1 centimeter wide casing. Then press again. Then unfold the top raw edge and mark the buttonholes placement on each side of the center front on the right side of the fabric, following the measurements given in the instructions. So the total length of the buttonholes should be 1 centimeter and their top should end just under the bottom crease, 2 centimeter from the top raw edge. Then sew the buttonholes according to your sewing machine's instructions and then open them with a seam ripper, and I like to place a pin at the top to prevent me from ripping through my buttonhole threads. Then refold the top raw edge to the wrong side, pin and edge stitch along the fold to create a casing for the ties. Then make a mark on the casing on each side, 2 cm from the armhole, and insert the first tie with a safety pin until it reaches the other end. Then remove the safety pin and pull back the tie slowly into the casing up to the mark you made. Sew the tie across the casing to secure it 2 mm inside the mark, and then repeat for the other tie. Then we're going to move on to the back neckline. So sew 2 or 3 rows of basting stitches along the top raw edge of the back. The first row should be sewn at 7 mm seam allowance and the following ones at 7 mm from each other. Pull on the long threads to gather the fabric and gather down to the length given in the instructions based on your size. Then tie the threads to prevent the fabric from ungathering. Then we're going to sew the bias, so fold it in half lengthwise and press wrong sides together. Unfold it and fold each long edge to the center crease and press again. And then fold it again in half lengthwise along the center crease to enclose all raw edges and press. Then unfold the bias tape and place it right side down on the wrong side of the back at the top raw edge. Sew at 7 mm seam allowance. Then from the right side of the back, flip the bias up and fold its top raw edge up to the gathered edge of the back. Then fold it again so that the folded edge just covers the stitch line and pin. Then edge stitch the bias along the fold and remove the basting stitches and give it a good press. For the next step, starting with sewing the side seams, follow the top's instructions starting at 6 minutes and 28 seconds. And you're done. I hope you're happy with your Rafaela top or dress, and if you need inspiration for your next one, here are some of my testers versions. Thank you. See you in the next tutorial.